Ethan first noticed something wrong when his dog started barking at dawn, pacing back and forth between the living room window and the front door like something unfamiliar had invaded their quiet morning. When Ethan opened the door, expecting maybe a delivery box or a stray cat, he instead found a thick white envelope taped directly to the center of the wooden frame as if someone wanted to make absolutely sure he couldn't miss it. The bold red letters across the front said "Urgent HOA Notice," which was strange because he had never signed any HOA paperwork when he bought the property. He peeled it off, feeling the tape pull at the paint, and opened it right there on the porch while the cool air drifted around him. Inside, he found a multi-page packet filled with dense text, threats, and an unbelievable claim that he owed $70,000 in fines for unauthorized exterior modifications, even though he hadn't changed so much as a mailbox since moving in. At first he truly believed it had to be a mistake or maybe even some sort of prank, because who fines a person $70,000 without warning or a photo or even a reason that makes sense? But the next day he woke up to 2 neon orange violation tags slapped onto his truck windows as if he were a repeat criminal. Later that afternoon, someone he didn't recognize stood across the street taking photos of his house, scribbling notes, and walking off without a word. Then came the voicemails, one after another, each more aggressive than the last, warning him that refusing compliance would lead to escalated enforcement. Ethan reread the fine notice that night and realized something far more ridiculous than the fine itself. The HOA had no idea he owned the only road leading into the entire neighborhood. Marla didn't waste a single day escalating things. The morning after Ethan discovered the violation tags on his truck, he heard commotion outside and opened his blinds to see 2 uniformed HOA security officers standing at his front gate. They weren't real law enforcement, just overpaid rent-a-cops with shiny badges and clipboards, but they acted like they were conducting a federal raid. One of them rattled the locked gate and shouted that they were there to conduct a mandatory compliance inspection. Ethan stepped outside and told them they had no authority to set foot on his property, which only encouraged them to start taking more photos of his yard, garage door, and even the side of his house. He recorded everything on his phone, making sure their threats were clear. By noon, a new notice appeared in his mailbox stating that his fines had been increased to $70,000 plus $500 per day for ongoing obstruction. The HOA board held what they called an emergency disciplinary meeting that evening, and from across the street Ethan could hear raised voices and the scraping of folding chairs being dragged across Marla's driveway. Within hours, several neighbors who previously waved at him stopped making eye contact, as if Marla had poisoned the entire community with some story about him being a rebellious troublemaker. The next morning Ethan received a bold letter declaring that the HOA would be placing a lien on his home if he didn't pay immediately. That was the moment he stopped laughing at the absurdity and started treating it like the real, dangerous harassment it was becoming. He gathered every notice, every voicemail, every photo, and drove straight to his property attorney. When Ethan laid the original road deed on the attorney's desk, detailing that the private road running into the neighborhood belonged entirely to him, the attorney leaned back, folded his arms, and smiled. They had absolutely no idea who they were threatening. Ethan didn't wait long before taking action. As soon as his attorney confirmed the legality of everything, they drafted a formal notice addressed directly to the HOA board. It was short, calm, and devastatingly clear. The letter stated that Ethan, as the sole legal owner of the private road leading into the entire subdivision, was revoking all access for the HOA and anyone acting under its authority. He posted the notice at the community entrance and mailed an official copy to Marla. For the first time since the harassment began, the neighborhood's daily routine shattered. Within hours, confusion rippled through the community. Delivery trucks slowed at the entrance, reading the large sign Ethan placed, "Private road access temporarily suspended. Inquiries must be directed to the owner." Residents started calling one another, speculating wildly. Some thought it was a construction issue, others assumed it was a prank. But when school buses hesitated and drivers refused to enter without written permission, panic finally set in. Marla stormed up to Ethan's property, pounding on the gate and demanding an explanation. Ethan simply handed her a copy of the deed showing that the road was never transferred to the HOA or the builder, meaning no easement had ever been recorded. Legally, they had been trespassing for years. Marla sputtered, insisting Ethan couldn't just shut down the entire community, but the law didn't care about her outrage. She accused him of blackmail, manipulation, and trying to destroy neighborhood unity. Ethan calmly reminded her that he wasn't the one issuing fake fines, threatening liens, or sending untrained security to harass residents. He then offered a peaceful, reasonable solution: drop all fines, issue a written apology, and agree to a small annual maintenance fee for continued access. Instead of accepting, the HOA held a dramatic meeting in the cul-de-sac where Marla vowed to fight him in court. She didn't realize she had already lost. Ethan had given the HOA every chance to act reasonably, but when they doubled down and threatened another lawsuit, he decided it was time to show them he wasn't bluffing. Early Saturday morning, before most residents were even awake, a contractor he hired installed a heavy steel gate across the community entrance. It wasn't decorative or symbolic. It was solid, locked, and legally enforceable. A bright sign hung from the center that read, "Private property. Access restricted until further notice." By the time the first cars rolled up, people were already confused. By the time the 10th car arrived, people were panicking. Drivers honked. Others stepped out of their vehicles and tried shaking the gate as if brute force would magically undo years of ignored property rights. More residents arrived, forming a messy crowd while arguing about what Ethan could or couldn't legally do. Some blamed Marla, others blamed Ethan, most had no idea what was actually happening. Around mid-morning, Marla arrived in a fury, arms flailing, demanding the crowd stand back as if she had the authority to command anything. She marched up to Ethan, who stood calmly with his attorney's letter in hand. Marla screamed that he was holding the neighborhood hostage and vowed to have him arrested. Moments later, police arrived after multiple residents called 911. But when officers saw the deed, the posted notices, and the clear documentation, they informed Marla that Ethan was completely within his rights. The look on her face when the police refused to remove the gate was priceless. As evening approached, the chaos only grew. A line of cars stretched down the road, headlights glowing helplessly against the steel barrier. Residents were stuck outside their own homes, arguing in circles while the HOA board bickered among themselves. From his porch, Ethan watched the meltdown unfold, knowing this was only the beginning. The next morning, Ethan woke to a cluster of exhausted, frustrated residents gathered near the gate, many of them still in pajamas, wrapped in blankets, and sipping coffee from travel mugs as if camping out on the roadside had become an overnight neighborhood tradition. Some approached him cautiously, no longer with anger but with desperation. They wanted answers, solutions, anything that would allow them to get to work, take their kids to school, or simply return to their normal lives. For the first time since the ordeal began, people weren't blaming him, they were blaming the HOA. That afternoon, Ethan agreed to meet everyone in the cul-de-sac. The entire neighborhood showed up, except for a few who stood huddled behind Marla like loyal but confused soldiers. Ethan remained calm as he laid out the documented truth: the road belonged to him, the HOA never had legal authority over his property, the fines were fraudulent, and Marla had been enforcing regulations that didn't apply to him or legally to anyone. Gasps spread through the crowd as he presented the deed, the survey records, and the attorney's analysis. A murmur of outrage rose, but this time it wasn't directed at Ethan. Residents turned toward Marla, demanding explanations. She stammered, blamed administrative oversights, and tried to redirect attention, but no one believed her anymore. The HOA board had an emergency vote right there in the street. Within minutes, Marla was removed as president, and a majority agreed to dissolve the HOA entirely. Several residents later filed civil complaints against Marla for harassment, misuse of funds, and falsifying violations. Ethan unlocked the gate only after signing private agreements with homeowners for road maintenance, affordable fees that collectively covered his entire yearly property tax and then some. A week later, Ethan received one final letter from the now-defunct HOA. It formally canceled the $70,000 fine and apologized for the misund.